Hi, and welcome to week 2 of Publicity Workshop. So, as I said before, I'll always start with checking in. Checking in is really just asking you to take a moment to sort of just do a little self-audit. How's school starting? How are the other classes? What's going on outside of school, work, home? What is your intention for this course? What is making you super excited about this course? What are you kind of dreading about your academic experience? Just, taking a moment. We'll do this every class. It's just, I want to give you the opportunity just to sort of take a moment for yourself. So we'll start this class with 2 videos, which are in the Blackboard shell. The first is from Brian Fallon, the director of the Writing and Speaking Studio, and the second is from Maria Rothenberg, a librarian at our fantastic library, talking about research and databases. Please take time to watch those. They're very informative and very relevant to the kind of work that we'll be doing in this course. Tell Me a Story is also a reminder for you to keep your peripheral vision open and it's sharpened in focus. A lot of what we'll be talking about in this course is how we look at the world, how we connect dots through design thinking, how we create news events, and how we understand our audiences. So always think about how you see the world and your ability to articulate and tell the story. One of the videos that you were to watch for this week was the Amy Cuddy video about the stories we tell ourselves. Very important. Again, I've shown this video now for a number of semesters, and I have students come back and reach out to me after the class in terms of, they tried it for an interview, they tried it for a job promotion, whatever it was, and how they succeeded. So again, remember, even though the initial premise of this video is about body language, ultimately it's about the stories we tell ourselves. This movie, What Women Want, premiered in the year 2000. What was so interesting about this movie and why I'm including it in our second class is that this movie premise, for those of you that hadn't seen it, is about an ad executive's ability, a marketer's ability to read women's minds. And because of that, what kind of effect would it have? And we're going to talk a lot about understanding your audience. Now, we don't have the ability to read people's minds, but we often, as publicists, as marketers, anyone in the AMC sector or industries, we wish we could read people's minds and what they really thought. So popular that the concept was kind of flipped in 2019, What Men Want, where a woman, a female marketing executive, was able to better understand her audience of men. So I put this video into our Blackboard shell, and it's there for you to watch. And if you haven't seen the movie, take a moment and stream it. As I said in our first class, supplies for class that don't cost a thing, and I gave you the list, but really want to come back to curiosity and empathy, and this is going to be the key to you being successful in not only publicity and PR and public speaking, but also in any aspect of advertising and marketing communications. The second video related to those 2 soft skills I just discussed is the Brene Brown video, which you were to watch for this class, about empathy and sympathy. One of the reasons I show this is many people confuse the two, and as sympathetic people, they believe they're being very empathetic. But the other reason I show you this, I want you to watch this video, is to better understand how you can empathetically understand your audience, your brand, your news channel partners, and your colleagues. So my question to you is, what role can empathy play in being a great publicist? Well, in my opinion, it's the difference between being a great publicist and not being in this industry at all. You really have to understand when you communicate that your audience is 50% of the communication. So let's start. As I said in last class with my favorite quote for this course, doubt is not a pleasant condition, but certainty is absurd. And we're going to talk a little bit about when not to be so certain about the world. So let's start with the framework of public relations writings. I believe very deeply, and my professional experience has shown me this, context is everything. Context in knowing your brand, knowing your news channel partner, and knowing your audience. So I want you to start by creating teams and selecting brands. And what I want to do is when you connect with other people in this course to create this 3 or 4 person team, I want you as a team to select a first and second choice of the brand you'd like to focus on for all of this semester. And I'll explain that a little bit. What this means is, as a team, let's say you have a 4-person team, and you all agree that brand X is your first choice. Brand Y is your second choice, right? As you go through our projects and our presentations and our news releases throughout this semester, you're going to focus on one aspect of the brand. So, for example, if your team chooses brand X, you might choose, I want to focus my semester on the founder of brand X. Your teammate might choose, I want to focus on the brand X's relationship to children. Another team member might say, I want to focus on brand X's relationship to beauty, and the last team member wants to focus on brand X's relationship to fashion. So now you have 4 different sectors of the same brand. You'll do your work independently. You'll submit your work independently, but you'll present as a team. You will now be the most knowledgeable person in our class about your brand. We won't have any duplicates from team to team, which is why I want you to select a first and a second choice. Send all that to me, and it's in the Ask Your Professor discussion forum, which you'll see in discussion forums. So I'd like one person from the team to list the members of that team and then their first and second brand choices. By the end of the week, I'll review the list and then send the final list out to you regarding teams and brand choices. Okay? If you have any questions, reach out to me. First, reach out to your team members, and then reach out to me. If for some reason you'd like to work alone, you still can do that, but you still need to participate in the discussion forum posting, meaning you're still going to give me, your name, that you want to work alone, and that here's your first brand choice and your second brand choice. Now, what that means is you're going to tell us about an aspect of the brand, but then you're going to want to continue to expand on telling us about your brand. So the scope of your work might be a bit broader. You'll be working by yourself. One of the reasons I like teamwork for this course very much is, let's say you're working on brand X, and I've chosen to focus on the founder, and my teammate has one of my teammates has chosen to focus on children. As they're researching the brand's relationship to children to complete their work, they might come across a news event or an upcoming story or a video that talks about the founder, and they can relay it to you. So you can see how team members can start to share in the research. Even though the work is still individual, the submissions are still individual, your part of the recorded video is presentation is still individual, but you're able to act as a team because you're all trying to become experts in one brand this semester. So let's look at our objectives for this week. We want to describe the challenges faced by publicists in making news, analyze the important characteristics of newsworthy information, report the two main sources of gathering news, evaluate the meaning of the term pseudo-event, and that's super relevant in the 21st century, describe techniques for generating creative ideas, we're all creative in our own way, and describe the 9 different ways of creating interesting news. So let's start with describing the challenges faced by publicists in making news. One of the biggest challenges is timeliness, meaning if it's not timely, if it's going to have lots of delays, the news will be gone. It won't be relevant to your audience any longer. So if there's some sort of event of breaking news, events, situations, controversies that are happening now, you have to really act quickly, craft your news release in a great way where you have enough facts. You want to perhaps make your pitch to your trusted partner in a specific news channel where it might be the most relevant, but you have to act quickly. Issues and controversies are really great fodder for creating news. Things like global warming, trends in the economy, political divide in this country and other countries. These are things, they're not only good for the publicist to create news events, highlighting different aspects of them, but they're also important to society. Speculative Journalism discussion forum will be open next week. It'll be due by the end of the week. You'll find that in our discussion forum section of the Blackboard shell. And this really talks about one of the tools available to the publicist regarding speculating or forecasting what could happen because of what is happening today. So again, this is about connecting dots. You'll read an article, you'll answer the questions, and then remember to receive the full possible points of 100. You'll need to not only post your response first, but then you'll need to find one of your classmates' posts and make comment on that. And remember, for all of our discussion forums, it's not sufficient to just respond to a classmate's post by saying, I agree, or great job, or never thought about it that way. We really want you to say that and then elaborate on that. Tell us your feelings, your thoughts, why you think it's a great post, why you never thought about a problem in a certain way, etc., etc. So what makes news? One of the brands that's been in the news over the last couple of years is Tiffany's. So want to have breakfast at Tiffany's? So I thought it'd be great to start with, and I have this in our Blackboard shell, the clip of the opening credits of the movie that premiered in the 1960s in the last century. If you haven't seen the movie, if you haven't read the Capote book, I highly recommend it. It's a fascinating case study. But the reason I'm including it in this course is it also, through a beautiful narrative, highlights the societal importance of this amazing global mega brand called Tiffany's. So what happened? If you're aware of some of the controversy of the last couple of years and then ultimately the buyout, what happened after 183 years? And I kind of stop at 2020 because that's when the buyout controversy started to happen. What happened? What changed in society? How did Tiffany lose its connection to its audience? How was it not, as relevant or no longer as relevant to the next generation as it was to previous generations? Remember, Tiffany's is a generational brand. Your great-grandmother, your grandmother, your mother, yourself, your children. That has been the legacy of Tiffany's. So we always want to look at that to better understand the role of public relations, the role of empathy, the role of staying connected to an audience, and the role of reintroducing a brand to an audience. So let's continue on. So I include on the right, keep calm and what's in it for me, because what we're talking about here is not just the tools of the publicist. It's also the publicist understanding their audience and understanding no matter what story that you tell as a publicist, your audience is ultimately going to bring it back to themselves. They're going to hear it through their life experience. They're going to see it, an event through their life experience. It's always going to come back to what's in it for me. So prominence, proximity, significance, all very important. So let's evaluate significance. You must know as a publicist not only how many people will be affected, but also who will be affected and why. Know your audience. Secondly, you must convince media gatekeepers that the issue, product, or service is significant to their readers, listeners, or viewers. And what that means is, and we'll talk about this in coming weeks, this is about building the relationship with news channels, right? With bloggers, with people who have podcasts. This is about building, a reputation and a legacy for yourself as someone who really brings significant stories that will not only help the audience, the ultimate audience, but also will be brand enhancing to the media gatekeeper. Unusual topics or challenges are great fodder for the publicist. A few years back, you might remember the Popeye chicken sandwich debacle. If you aren't familiar with it, it's a fast food chain, never had a chicken sandwich before, introduced a short-term addition to their menu. It sold out in 2 weeks. Their audience, their followers went wild. It went viral. People were killed. People were in fights. It was actually an interesting cultural phenomenon that happened. Another cultural phenomenon that happened is how brands are gathering a new sense of courage based on understanding their audience. Here's from last year's Gay Pride Month overseas, an ad image for the campaign Love Conquers All of the Burger King and Ronald McDonald kissing. And what was so interesting about this and what caused so much controversy is globally, McDonald's and Burger King are family restaurants. They are also fierce competitors. So the outcry from conservative traditional families around the world was amazing, and also the praise for saying, this is about we're all in this together. Let's stop the fighting for a moment. Let's appreciate each other's differences. And I think this was done amazingly well. Human interest stories are amazing fodder for the publicist. Here you have Cardi B, one of my favorites, and Boomer. So even though she's not the person who said, okay, Boomer, that was a moment in human history of last year, and really started to talk to this incredible generational divide that's happening around the world, primarily due to technology. So we look at human interest stories as a great place for the publicist. Conflict is a great place to create news stories. Labor disputes, climate change, same-sex marriages. Our friend here, Greta, brought climate change to a whole new generation with a whole new story to tell in a language that everyone understood and adopted and believed. So what is newsworthiness and what are some of the pitfalls? So how to find news? And again, this is the challenge of being curious, being empathetic. There are two main sources of gathering news, internal and external news sources. So for internal news sources, that's things more within our control, right? So that's either within the brand, within existing channels, papers, periodicals, things like that. Significant news of your brand is also sources of effective news, contracts, jobs, I have a new CEO. We have we lost a major partner. External sources is really where your audience is living. That's the world of the internet, the world of technology, the world of sound bites, visual as well as written. And how do you tap into those moments and through design thinking connect the dots to really deliver relevant, interruptive, timely news stories? How to find creative new opportunities? Well, remember, go back to design thinking. That's that balance of right and left brain, the creative side with the logic side. Evaluate the meaning of the term pseudo-event. And, I love this image of a Kardashian in her, $100,000, white pantsuit with her $35,000 gold necklace, shopping at groceries just like any other housewife. I believe the reason for the story, if you see in the cart, was water, and she was, in a charitable way delivering water. But this idea of her shopping like the other housewives was a pseudo-event. So how do you generate creative ideas? I know a lot of you may think you're not as creative as maybe your peers, your colleagues, people that you admire, but I believe that you just haven't discovered your creativity yet. Creativity, in my opinion, is really about, going back to when we were children, which is why I show you this image. Children lead with creativity. They lead with their gut. They lead with the right side of their brain. They're always seeing the world in new and unseen ways because they don't have history. No one told them they couldn't. They have no yesterday to look back on. Everything is new. So it's trying to put yourself in that position to see the world in creative ways, to write in creative ways, to present ideas in creative ways, to, even for this course, record your presentation in a creative way. So let's talk about the 9 ways of creating interesting news. And I won't go deep into this. You can watch this video again. It's also in your text. Special events, contests, polls and surveys, top 10 lists. Here I give you an example of Jane Fonda, in handcuffs. As some of you may know, she's an activist and has dedicated her life to being an activist of fighting climate change. And this isn't just a celebrity who's, I think she's 82 at this point, getting arrested. This is Jane Fonda in 1972. So 50 years ago, protesting the Vietnam War, getting arrested, this is her mugshot, getting arrested for her protest. In other words, she's a product, she's a brand that uses her celebrity platform to bring awareness to causes that she believes strongly in. Product demonstrations, publicity stunts, rallies, protests, personal appearances. For example, it was a group of publicists and marketers who created the Academy Awards. It wasn't Hollywood. It wasn't a director, right? So why do you think the Academy Awards started in 1929? What was happening in this country in 1929 that was bigger than Hollywood? It was the Great Depression. So this was a way that marketers and public relations could solve 2 big problems. One was the financial problem that Hollywood and the movie machine was having. But the second was, how could they lighten and lift the general mood in this country during one of our darkest times in the country's history? Submitting a plan for approval, super important. We talk a lot about the creative part. Submitting a plan and understanding your responsibility and your accountability as a publicist is time and money, not just a great idea. So our objectives here, we look at a written plan to be imperative to ensure the effectiveness of any campaign, scrutinize the initial steps of developing the plan, classify the 8 elements that should be incorporated in the campaign plan, and express the importance of ensuring the soundness of any campaign before submitting it for approval. So you want the value of the written plan. You want to make sure that all of your information is there, that you're really setting out a kind of a Bible of what you're proposing to your brand. You want to develop a PR plan Identify the situation. How do you see the world? What legacy have you begun in terms of how you're going to, whether you're from the outside consulting or within a brand, letting your internal stakeholders know, and then engage your stakeholders in the upfront conversation. This is what I see. This is why I see it. This is my primary research. This is what I've learned. This is the nature of the campaign, and this is what it could deliver. Gathering information. We can do it inside the firm. We can do it outside the firm. Brainstorms are a great way of gathering new ideas, interruptive ideas. Focus groups interviews, surveys. These things don't cost a lot of money, but they give you a lot of insight, and they give you more data points, more points of what's going on in society that you can start to connect the dots in new and interesting ways. Analyzing information. Again, you're going to get all of this information from all these ways of gathering it. You want to make sure that you can separate credible from not credible, or you want to, if something is a great insight or a great point of view or a great discovery that you feel is not so credible, do a little bit more research based on that insight. See if you can build credibility. Then you follow next steps, and this is really about design thinking. 1 and 1 doesn't always equal 2. Draw conclusions. And it's not just one conclusion. Draw a few conclusions. Prepare an outline of findings. Discuss points with your management, with your client, with the stakeholders. 8 elements of a PR plan. Let's talk about that a little bit. The organization's situation. Here you want to sort of understand the public's perception of the organization today and what you know of society today, and you start to look at gaps that you can grow and change. In the case of what I talk about here, it's Lay's potato chips. Many of you have eaten those. They're one of my favorites. But a few years ago, they started this campaign, this ongoing campaign, I should say, to celebrate their 75th anniversary. Really clever. It wasn't just about we're 75 years old, yay for us that we've stayed around this long, and we're the #1 chip. What they said was, let's build a strategy that starts to engage the next generation. Let's build a strategy that starts to expand touch points within our audience. So they engage their audience in creating new flavors. Some stuck, some didn't. Campaign objectives. Informal objectives, motivational objectives, and measurable objectives. We want to make sure that we focus on our primary focus of why we're creating the strategy we're creating, and then how many of these secondary objectives can we also achieve. Campaign audience. We're going to be talking a lot about knowing your audience. In the 20th century, many things were about demographics and general public. In the 21st century, there's no longer a thing called a general public. We're so diverse. We're aware of our diversity. We've connected through psychographics in how we think with people around the world. Our tribes and communities are no longer located in one area. It's about one mindset. Campaign strategies. We want to make sure that they're broad, they're dynamic, they're open for change, they're different models. Key messages, never overestimate someone's ability to take in information. As I said, you have to repeat. You have an audience who has very little time. So I'm a fan of one message with maybe a secondary message, depending on the nature of the messages, up to 3. Campaign tactics, how to do it. So, like I talked about in the beginning of today's class, it's about time. It's about, when are we doing this? What's the sequence of events? How timely is this? Does it make sense to our audience's perception of time? What are the scheduled activities that will make sense for our audience? Ensure that the message reaches everyone frequently. They say you have to tell someone something 8 times for the message to be clear. And with that in mind, with that adage in mind, it's about telling. Now, it's not just about repeating the message. It's about reinforcing the message in new and creative ways. Campaign budget. It's time, it's people, and it's money, right? So, understanding that people are our most valuable assets in any company, in any effort, but, there's budget involved. There's scope of budget. Campaign evaluation. This is something that has to be done up front, and then it also has to be done throughout the process and at the end. Meaning, how are we going to define success? Has there been any new data or thoughts about success? And then looking back, how successful were we? Submitting a PR plan for approval. So be open-minded. Yes, you want to submit the plan with the format that your text will outline for you, statement of your principles, responsibilities, but you want to know that you always, with any idea, you want to leave room for being open-minded or having a growth mindset. You might learn new aspects of your audience that have just changed last night. So have a great week. I know that's a lot of information, but it's sort of setting the baseline for what we're going to talk about. And you can watch this video again, read your text, and complete your weekly quizzes. Remember, some weeks have more than one quiz. Have a great week, and I'll talk to you next week.